The sun beat down on Dry Creek, a harsh, unforgiving oven that baked the very spirit out of most. But not Clara Whitlock. Not yet. Her calloused hands, once soft as a preacher's daughter should be, now knew the bite of rope and the grit of soil. She stood framed in the doorway of her modest ranch house, a silhouette against the unrelenting glare, watching a lone rider kick up a distant plume of dust that advanced like an ominous cloud. Her son, Eli, a boy of 10 with eyes far too old for his years, clung to her skirts, drawing comfort from her solid presence. Ellie's voice was a whisper, filled with the innocent curiosity of childhood. Clara didn't answer immediately, her gaze fixed on the approaching figure. Even from this distance, something in the rider's posture spoke of grim determination, an almost desperate drive. Dry Creek hadn't known peace in years. It was a place where cattle barons ruled with an iron fist, and the echoes of a devastating war still resonated in the hearts of men. Her ranch, a testament to her late husband's dream and her own stubborn will, had always been a sanctuary, an island of self-reliance in a sea of lawlessness. The townsfolk respected her grit, her uncanny ability to keep the homestead afloat after her husband's untimely demise in a mining accident. But respect, she knew, didn't put food on the table, nor did it fend off the vultures circling her precious land. Just yesterday, Moses Turnbull, the self-proclaimed mayor and the biggest vulture of them all, had announced his latest scheme, a Land Reallocation Act. Any property not owned by a recognized unified family would be swallowed whole by his cattleman's gild, a thinly veiled front for his avarice. 30 days. That's all she had to secure her future. 30 days to find a phantom husband, a ghost to haunt her home, and protect what was hers. The irony was a bitter taste in her mouth. She, who valued independence above all else, was reduced to this. The rider was closer now, a long, lean silhouette atop a limping, half-blind horse. He bore the dust of 1,000 trails, and the weary set of his shoulders spoke of burdens far heavier than saddlebags. A drifter, no doubt, just another lost soul seeking refuge or trouble in Dry Creek. But hope, a desperate, fledgling thing, flickered within Clara's tired heart. Could this be him? The temporary solution to her impossible problem? The one who would front as her husband, just long enough to save her legacy? The dust cloud began to swirl around the yard, kicking up a dry, choking smell. The drifter reined in his battered horse, nudge, a few feet from Clara's porch, the animal's uneven breath sounding like a rusty hinge. He was tall, lean, and covered in the dust of countless miles, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low, shadowing eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. Jack Colton. That was the name he offered, a voice rough as gravel, yet with an unexpected, almost gentle cadence. Clara studied him, her gaze unwavering. He looked like everything and nothing all at once, a man forged in hard living, yet with a quiet stillness that was unsettling. He asked, his eyes sweeping over the dusty yard, the sturdy but simple ranch house, then settling on Eli, who peeked cautiously from behind his mother. "I'm Clara Whitlock," she replied, her voice firm despite the tremor of desperation in her stomach. "I'm looking for a man willing to pose as my husband. A temporary arrangement." She omitted the part about Turnbull's degree, the gnawing fear that tightened her chest like a corset. This was a transaction, nothing more. She didn't need pity. Jack dismounted, a fluid movement despite a slight stiffness in his left leg. He stood before her, not close enough to be threatening, not far enough to be dismissive. A roof over his head, hot meals, and a fair day's wage, Clara stated, her chin lifting defiantly. The last part slipped out, a raw edge to her normally pragmatic tone. Jack's lips twitched slightly, a ghost of a smile that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Turnbull," he murmured, not a question, but a statement. He knew. Of course, he knew. Everyone in Dry Creek knew the cattle baron's reputation. "He's a powerful man," Clara admitted, her gaze locking with his. "He won't take kindly to being thwarted." He considered her words, his face unreadable. "Eli," emboldened by the relative quiet, stepped out fully, openly staring at Jack. Jack met the boy's gaze, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something unburdened passed through his eyes. "All right," he said finally, pulling a crumpled, sweat-stained bandana from his pocket and wiping his brow. "I'll hear your terms, but understand, Mrs. Whitlock, I'm a man who keeps to himself." Clara nodded. "Neither do I. Come in, Mr. Colton." As she turned to lead him into the house, she couldn't shake the unnerving feeling that she wasn't just bringing a stranger into her home, but a force of nature, one that was about to collide with her carefully constructed, solitary world. Life on the ranch settled into a strange rhythm. Jack worked with quiet efficiency, his hands accustomed to hard labor. He repaired fences, mended the barn roof, and even managed to coax more water from the stubborn well. Clara found herself watching him, her carefully constructed walls of independence slowly eroding. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He was good with Eli, patient and kind, showing the boy how to tie knots and track rabbits, things Clara, despite her best efforts, couldn't teach. Eli, starved for a male presence, began to shadow Jack, a silent hero worship blooming in his young heart. But the truce was fragile, constantly threatened by the unseen hand of Moses Turnbull. The first sign was subtle, a whisper in town questioning Jack's presence. "Just a drifter, ain't he?" Clara heard these rumors from June Apple, the saloon keeper, a woman whose sharp eyes and even sharper tongue missed nothing. June, a former lover of Turnbull's, was a rare ally, a walking library of Dry Creek secrets. She warned Clara, "He's testing the waters, Clara." Then the sabotage began. A small brush fire, conveniently close to Clara's nascent crop, was discovered just in time. Jack, his face a mask of grim resolve, helped Clara beat back the flames. "Not natural," he muttered, kicking at the scorched earth. The escalating threats soon turned direct. One sweltering afternoon, as Clara and Jack drove the wagon into town for supplies, a hail of gunfire erupted from the surrounding mesquite. Bushwhackers, paid by Turnbull, intended to send a clear message. Jack, quick as a desert snake, barked orders, pushing Clara and Eli down behind the wagon bed as bullets splintered the wood around them. He returned fire with an unexpected precision, his old rifle singing a deadly tune. They escaped, shaken but unharmed, the attackers melting back into the unforgiving landscape. Jack refused to let the incident lie. He rode straight to Turnbull's sprawling estate, confronting the cattle baron face to face. Clara, a knot of worry in her stomach, followed. The confrontation was tense. Turnbull's sneering denial met with Jack's quiet fury. Deputy Hal Bridges, once a noble man, stood by, his eyes avoiding their gaze, clearly bought and paid for. Justice, clear and true, seemed a distant dream in Dry Creek. Days blurred into weeks. The fake marriage continued, a fragile shield against Turnbull's machinations. The lines between their agreement and their growing, reluctant respect began to blur. One evening, as Jack cleaned his rifle on the porch, Eli sat beside him, his small voice quiet. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken longing. Jack paused, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, but he offered no answer. The air in June Apple's saloon was thick with cigar smoke and the clatter of poker chips, but June herself was a beacon of calm behind the bar, wiping it clean with a slow, methodical rhythm. Clara, nursing a weak whiskey, unburdened her fears. "It's not just the ranch, June, it's Eli." "And Jack." June, her eyes shrewd, nodded. "Turnbull ain't one to give up easily, honey. He smells blood in the water." She paused, her gaze drifting to a loose floorboard near the stage. "Funny, your late husband, bless his soul, always used to fiddle with that board when he came in for a drink. Said it was loose." She tapped it with her boot heel. A spark ignited in Clara's mind. Her husband, Thomas, had been a man of quiet habits and secrets. With a sudden urgency, Clara excused herself, moving toward the stage. June watched, a knowing look on her face, but said nothing. Clara knelt, her fingers prying at the stubborn wood. With a creak, it gave way, revealing a small, hidden cavity. Inside, rolled tight and tied with a leather thong, was a brittle, yellowed piece of parchment. A map. It was hand-drawn, meticulous in its detail, clearly Thomas's distinctive script. Not a treasure map, but something far more valuable. It showed the Whitlock Ranch, but beneath it, marked with a series of crosses and an almost childish drawing of gushing water, was an astonishing revelation. A deep underground water source, a veritable aquifer, enough to turn the arid land green year-round, enough to make Dry Creek bloom. This was why Turnbull wanted it so desperately. Not for cattle, but for absolute control, for power over life itself in this parched land. Clara rushed back to the ranch, map clutched in her hand. Jack was mending a bridle, Eli perched on a fence post nearby. "Jack," she breathed, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. He took the map, his eyes widening as he deciphered the crude, yet unmistakable markings. A long silence stretched between them, pregnant with unspoken truths. Then Jack spoke, his voice low, gravelly, yet filled with a raw honesty Clara had never heard from him. "Clara," he began, his gaze meeting hers, unflinching. "I ain't just a drifter, hired on for a season." He paused, taking a ragged breath. "I was a scout for the Confederacy, part of a detachment that took and destroyed settlements. Innocent folks. I saw things, did things." His eyes were distant, filled with ghosts. "I ain't proud of it. I've been running from it, trying to outrun the man I was. I came here, drifting, but I saw you. And Eli, you're trying to do something good, Clara. Something right." He looked at the map again, then back at Clara, a profound shift in his hard-won composure. "Turnbull wants this because he sees the money. But you see the life. I'll fight for this. For you, for Eli, for this land. Real husband or not." The confession hung in the air, a raw, undeniable truth. And in that moment, something broke between them. The careful boundaries of their arrangement shattered, replaced by a profound, if unspoken, trust. Turnbull, furious and desperate after Clara's discovery of the map and Jack's renewed resolve, moved to seize the land immediately. He forced an early trial, pulling strings with the circuit judge, a man whose pockets were as deep as Turnbull's ambitions. The courthouse was packed, the air thick with tension and the unspoken knowledge that justice in Dry Creek was a commodity to be bought, not earned. The judge, a bloated man with a perpetually damp brow, hurried through the proceedings, clearly intending to rubber-stamp Turnbull's claim. But as he prepared to deliver his verdict, Jack Colton rose, his voice cutting through the stuffy courtroom. "I call for a settlement," he stated, his eyes fixed on Turnbull. A murmur rippled through the townsfolk. This was the old way, a duel witnessed by the community, designed for a land where law was often a distant whisper. Turnbull, surprised but confident in his marksmanship and reputation, sneered. "Just a wish for justice," Jack replied, calm as a stone. High noon. The crooked courthouse stood stoic under the merciless sun, its shadow falling short of the line drawn in the dust where Jack and Turnbull stood. Silence, heavy and absolute, descended upon Dry Creek. The townsfolk gathered, a somber, expectant crowd. Eli, clutched in Clara's hand, was pale but brave, his eyes fixed on Jack. The appointed moment arrived. 2 men, 2 revolvers, 6 shots each. The first shot cracked, then another, the rhythm of lead against air. Jack, a seasoned hand, fired with calculated precision, aiming to disarm, to deter. Turnbull, however, aimed to kill. Suddenly, a 6th shot rang out from Turnbull's side, an illegal, hidden derringer fired from his sleeve. Jack cried out, stumbling backward as a searing pain erupted in his leg. Turnbull had cheated. A gasp went through the crowd, a collective intake of breath. The judge looked away, unwilling to acknowledge the transgression. Seeing Jack fall, Clara reacted on instinct. Without a moment's hesitation, she unholstered her late husband's rifle from her hip, the well-oiled wood familiar in her grasp. Not for her to use, but to pass on. Her eyes met Jack's, a shared understanding blooming in the inferno of the moment. This was it. Trust. Legacy. Everything. With a powerful heave, she threw the rifle across the dusty expanse. It spun end over end, a blur of wood and steel, landing in Jack's outstretched hand. He caught it, his injured leg buckling, but his gaze remained locked on Turnbull. The rifle, Thomas's rifle, now in Jack's hands, was more than a weapon. It was a testament, a passing of the torch. Jack raised the rifle, his aim unwavering despite the pain. The dry crack of the shot echoed through Dry Creek, a sound that would forever mark the town. Turnbull stumbled backward, a surprised, guttural cry escaping his lips, then fell, hit square, a dark stain spreading on his chest. Dust settled over the fallen figure, a grim shroud. Justice was delivered. The town was irrevocably changed. Deputy Bridges, his face etched with shame, unfalteringly resigned on the spot. And though no official declaration was made, the townsfolk, their voices a rising tide of affirmation, implicitly crowned Clara the legal landholder and the new matriarch of Dry Creek. Jack recuperated slowly, his leg mending, a constant reminder of the day justice was carved out of Dry Creek's dust. He limped, but his spirit remained unbowed. Life settled into a new normal on the Whitlock Ranch, now truly theirs, secured by blood and courage. Clara and Jack never exchanged vows, no fancy ceremony in front of a preacher. They didn't need to. Their bond had been forged in fire, stronger than any legal parchment. Jack, wordlessly, began building a fence, brick by brick, around the ranch. It was more than just a barrier. It was a promise, a symbol of permanence in a world that had always felt transient. He taught Eli how to ride, not just the basics, but the subtle language of horse and rider, how to feel the animal's rhythm beneath him. Eli, bright and quick, absorbed it all, the limping cowboy a steadfast presence, a father figure who had chosen to stay. And the land. The underground spring, now known to all, flowed with a powerful, constant promise. Clara, with the help of the townsfolk, began to transform the scorched earth. Her first act was to plant an apple tree, a delicate sapling rooted deeply in the revitalized soil. It was a humble beginning, but a testament to Clara's unwavering vision, a symbol of the lush future she now envisioned for her family and her home. Years passed. The single apple tree grew into an orchard, its blossoms fragrant in the spring, its fruit a bounty in the fall. Dry Creek, once a desolate, lawless outpost, began to flourish. Other families, inspired by Clara's resilience and the prosperity of the Whitlock Ranch, started digging their own wells, nurturing their own patches of green. The town, no longer under the shadow of a corrupt cattle baron, elected fair leaders, and the law, genuinely, began to take root. The final image, years later, shows Eli Whitlock, now a grown man, his face etched with wisdom, standing on a hill overlooking acres of vibrant green orchards. The Whitlock Ranch, once a lonely beacon in a dusty valley, was now the heart of a thriving community. He looks out over the fruitful landscape, a serene smile on his face, the sound of leaves rustling softly in the breeze. "My ma," Eli narrates, his voice rich with age and pride. "She saved this land." His gaze sweeps across the orchards, then settles on a figure in the distance, a silver-haired man, still moving with a slight limp, working contentedly amongst the trees. But the cowboy? Jack Colton? He saved us both. He brought justice to a lawless place. He taught me what it meant to be a man, even if his past was stained. The camera lingers on the peaceful, verdant landscape, a testament to resilience, redemption, and the enduring power of a place called home. The day Moses Turnbull's proclamation blared through Dry Creek was etched into Clara's memory with the searing heat of a brand. The town square, usually a sleepy expanse of dust and idlers, bustled with an uneasy crowd. Turnbull, a man whose girth matched his greed, stood on an upturned barrel, his voice booming like distant thunder. Clara's name wasn't mentioned, but her lone status as a widow, defending her homestead with only a child, made her an immediate, glaring target. 30 days. That was the ultimatum. 30 days to produce a husband or lose everything her late husband, Thomas, had worked for, everything she had suffered to keep. The words echoed in her ears, a chilling death knell for her independence. Panic, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm her. She had buried her husband. She had fought off drought, disease, and dishonest traders. But this was different. This was the law, twisted by a powerful man who craved her land, a man who saw her as vulnerable, an easy mark. She needed a shield, a name, a man to stand beside her, if only on paper. Clara returned to the ranch, her mind racing. Eli, sensing her distress, watched her with wide, worried eyes. There was only one solution, as distasteful as it was. She needed a man willing to pose as her husband just until harvest, just until the legal deadline passed. Someone without ties, without questions, who would understand the strict, temporary nature of their arrangement. The thought made her stomach churn. A preacher's daughter, now reduced to hiring a stranger to play her husband. The frontier had indeed toughened her, stripped her of frivolous notions of reputation, leaving only the fierce, primal instinct to protect her son and her land. She assessed her meager resources, her contacts. Dry Creek wasn't large, but drifters passed through. Men broken by war, by failure, by circumstance. Men who might be desperate enough for a roof and a meal to play a part. A few days later, a plume of dust materialized on the horizon, growing steadily larger. It heralded a lone rider, his silhouette stark against the setting sun. His horse, a battered, old nag with one milky eye, carried him with a weary patience. Clara watched from her porch, a strange mix of dread and desperate hope rising within her. Was this him? The accidental answer to her impossible prayer? As the rider drew closer, she saw the lines of hardship etched on his face, the quiet solitude in his bearing. He reined in his horse, and the dust, slowly, began to settle. The days blurred into a tense waiting game, a simmering pot of suspicion and fear on the Whitlock ranch. Jack, though quiet, was never idle. He fixed, he mended, he worked the fields alongside Clara, a silent, formidable presence. But the town gossips, fueled by Turnbull's insidious whispers, talked. They'd mutter in hushed tones at the general store. Heard he rode with outlaws. Jack's rough exterior and secretive past fed the distrust, making Clara's already precarious situation even more fragile. Clara, for her part, fought a constant internal battle. She was fiercely independent, her life a testament to her ability to stand alone. Now she was bound to this stranger, forced to feign a closeness that felt both alien and, at times, surprisingly comforting. She'd catch him watching Eli with a softness that contrasted sharply with his usual stoicism, and a curious warmth would spread through her. But then the pragmatic side of her, the side toughened by lust and deceit, would reassert itself. This was a temporary alliance, a business arrangement. She had to guard her heart as fiercely as her land. Turnbull, a master manipulator, didn't rely solely on gossip. He knew how to twist a knife. He publicly accused Jack of desertion, of theft from wartime deeds, digging up old, half-buried rumors to plant seeds of doubt. Deputy Hal Bridges, usually a man of principle, seemed to wring his hands more often than he upheld the law, caught between his duty and Turnbull's considerable influence. The tension escalated from whispers to direct threats. The first incident was subtle, almost deniable. A brush fire, springing up suspiciously close to Clara's nascent crops, sent plumes of smoke curling towards the house. Only Jack's keen eye and their frantic efforts contained it before it devoured everything. Someone wanted to send a message, Jack stated, his voice flat as they stomped out the last embers. It was no accident. Sabotage had begun. The next message was far less subtle. One blindingly bright afternoon, Clara and Jack were returning from town. Eli nestled between them in the wagon. Sudden crack of gunfire shattered the quiet, followed by a chorus of shots. Bushwhackers, paid by Turnbull, emerged from the surrounding scrub, their intent clear. Jack reacted instantly, pushing Clara and Eli down, shielding them with his own body as bullets tore into the wagon's wooden sides. He returned fire with an unexpected speed, his shots precise, impactful. They escaped, but the ambush left Clara rattled, a cold fear settling in her bones. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about their lives. Jack, refusing to be driven into hiding, rode directly to Turnbull's lavish estate, demanding an answer. Yet, in the face of Turnbull's smug denials and Deputy Bridges' deliberately blind eye, Jack found no justice. The law played sides, and theirs wasn't winning. The pressure mounted, both externally and within their unconventional family. One quiet evening, as Jack sat sharpening his knife on the porch, Eli, who had grown increasingly attached to the stoic man, looked up at him, his young face earnest. Jack paused, his hands still, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. He didn't answer. The silence said more than any words. The discovery of the water map in June Apple's saloon was a seismic shift, but it was Jack's words that truly shattered Clara's carefully constructed world. He wasn't merely a drifter with a shadowy past. He was a haunted man carrying the weight of terrible deeds. His confession, delivered with a raw vulnerability that stripped away his hardened exterior, resonated deep within Clara. He had been part of a Confederate detachment, a unit that had destroyed settlements, actions he now carried like a physical burden. He was here, he claimed, to finally do something right. This revelation, startling and profound, didn't push Clara away. Instead, it drew her closer. She had known loss, had experienced the brutal indifference of the frontier. Jack's honesty, his willingness to expose the darkest corners of his soul, unlocked a chamber in her own heart she thought had been sealed forever. It was a trust not built on shared pleasantries, but on shared pain and the glimmer of redemption. The truth of the water source explained Turnbull's relentless pursuit of her land. It wasn't just about expanding his cattle empire, it was about monopolizing life itself in Dry Creek, about controlling the very essence of survival in this arid land. The map, now a crucial piece of evidence, solidified their resolve. This was a battle for more than just a ranch. It was for the future of the entire valley. Jack, his decision solidified by the map and his confession, approached Turnbull one last time. Not with threats or violence, but with a quiet challenge that resonated with the town's own growing unrest. Turnbull, seeing his plans exposed and his authority openly challenged, moved swiftly. He called for an early trial, packing the courtroom with his paid cronies, confident that his bought-off judge would seal Clara's fate. The date was set. The atmosphere in Dry Creek was crackling, a storm brewing on the horizon. Deputy Hal Bridges, looking increasingly uncomfortable, tried to warn Clara. Turnbull's got the law in his pocket, Mrs. Whitlock. But Clara and Jack had a different kind of justice in mind. They knew the written law was a sham in Turnbull's hands. What was needed was a reckoning, a demonstration of principle that the town could witness and judge for itself. Jack, seeing the futility of court proceedings, would demand the dusty, unwritten code of the frontier. The day of the trial dawned, hot and oppressive. The courthouse, usually a somber building, felt like a powder keg. As the judge, a sweaty, anxious man, prepared to deliver his predetermined verdict, Jack Colton rose. His voice, clear and steady, cut through the tension. "I call for a settlement." A ripple of shocked whispers went through the room. This was a direct challenge to Turnbull's supposed authority, a gamble with life and death. Turnbull, taken aback, then smirked, confident in his own skill and the town's ingrained fear. He sneered, his eyes glinting with malicious glee. Jack's reply was simple, echoing the silent promise he'd made to Clara. The stage was set. High noon. The dust would bear witness. The air in Dry Creek stood still, thick with dust and held breath. It was high noon. The sun, a vengeful god, beat down on the crooked courthouse, casting sharp, unforgiving shadows. Two men stood in the street, an impossibly long distance apart, their figures stark against the baked earth. Moses Turnbull, his face a mask of arrogance, his hand hovering near his pistol. And Jack Colton, quiet, resolute, his eyes fixed on the man who sought to destroy Clara and her home. The townsfolk formed a silent, watchful semicircle, their faces grim. Eli, his small hand clutched tightly in Clara's, squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, then opened them, brave against the terror. Clara, her jaw set, stood tall, a silent pillar of strength beside her son. This was it, the moment of reckoning. A church bell, perhaps marking the hour, tolled once, its mournful clang echoing unnervingly in the silence. Then nothing. Just the whisper of the wind, the thumping of hearts. Suddenly, Turnbull's hand blurred, drawing his six-shooter with practiced speed. Jack, too, was a streak of movement. Shots cracked, sharp reports that tore through the quiet. Dust exploded around their feet as bullets impacted. Jack aimed for the arm, the leg, to disable. Turnbull aimed to kill. Then, a collective gasp from the crowd. A puff of smoke, too small, too low, erupted from Turnbull's side. He had cheated. A hidden derringer, a seventh shot. Jack cried out, his body jerking with the impact as a bullet tore into his leg. He stumbled, falling to one knee, a grimace of pain twisting his features. Turnbull, a sneer of triumph on his face, raised his main pistol for the killing blow. Clara's scream ripped through the air, wrought with desperation and fury. Without a second thought, she tore the rifle from her hip, Thomas's sturdy, familiar rifle. Her eyes locked with Jack's, conveying a lifetime of trust, of legacy, in that single, desperate glance. She wasn't a fighter, not in this way, but she would ensure the fight continued. With all her might, she threw the rifle across the dusty street. It tumbled end over end, a desperate prayer in flight, spinning through the air towards the fallen cowboy. Time seemed to slow. Turnbull, momentarily surprised by Clara's daring act, hesitated. That was all Jack needed. He caught the rifle, his strong fingers clamping around the smooth wood. Pain flared from his wounded leg, but his gaze remained locked on Turnbull. The rifle, heavy and true, felt right in his hands, not just a weapon, but a burden shared, a trust accepted. Turnbull, regaining his composure, brought his pistol to bear again, but Jack was faster. The rifle came up, a practiced, fluid motion. The crack of the shot was deafening, precise. Turnbull stumbled backward, his eyes wide with disbelief, a gurgling sound escaping his throat. He clutched at his chest, a dark, rapidly expanding stain blooming on his shirt. Then, with a final, shuddering breath, he crumpled to the dust, still and lifeless. A profound silence descended, broken only by the ragged breathing of the onlookers. Justice, raw and uncompromising, had been delivered in the sun-baked street of Dry Creek. The town was forever changed. Deputy Hal Bridges, pale and shaken, walked forward, looked at Turnbull's lifeless form, then at Jack, and finally at Clara. With a heavy sigh, he unbuckled his badge, letting it fall to the dust. The sheriff was gone. And then a ripple began. A woman stepped forward, then another, then a man, their eyes filled with something akin to reverence, then recognition. They looked at Clara, standing tall, courageous, with Eli at her side and Jack, wounded but victorious. The dust of the showdown settled, but what it revealed was far from finished. Jack, his leg bandaged and aching, but his spirit unbowed, recovered on the ranch. He didn't leave. Clara and Jack never spoke of marriage. No vows were exchanged, no rings purchased. Their bond had been forged in the crucible of conflict, a silent understanding deeper than any legal contract. He simply stayed. He started building a fence around the perimeter of the Whitlock Ranch, a testament to permanence, to belonging. Board by board, post by post, the barrier grew, not to keep others out, but to signify his rootedness, his quiet commitment. He taught Eli, patient and steady, how to ride Nudge, the old, half-blind horse, the boy's laughter echoing through the valley. It was a simple, wordless act of fatherhood, of mentorship. The underground spring, revealed by Thomas's map, became the lifeblood of their new beginning. Clara, with the community's support and a newfound optimism, began to realize her vision. The first apple tree, a tiny, defiant sapling, was planted, its slender form a promise of green abundance in the sun-baked land. Others followed, row upon row, transforming the parched earth into a nascent orchard. The spring ensured their growth, its steady flow a symbol of the prosperity and peace that had finally returned to Dry Creek. Years passed, years of hard work, of growth, of quiet, contented living. The humble ranch became a thriving homestead, its orchards burgeoning, its fields green. The town of Dry Creek itself grew, its spirit no longer choked by fear and corruption, but watered by the collective memory of what had transpired. Deputy Bridges, true to his word, had resigned, making way for a new, honest lawman. And the townsfolk, having witnessed Clara's unwavering strength and Jack's quiet sacrifice, rallied around her, recognizing her not just as a landowner, but as the true matriarch of their burgeoning community. The film fades to a future vision. Eli Whitlock, a grown man now, his hair flecked with silver, stands on a gentle rise, overlooking a magnificent expanse of flourishing apple orchards. The once dusty valley is now a tapestry of green and vibrant life, a testament to the grit and determination of those who carved a future from nothing. The familiar silhouette of an older Jack, still with a slight limp, can be seen in the distance, working among the trees, a permanent fixture in the landscape. Ellie's voice, imbued with wisdom and a deep, abiding gratitude, narrates, a quiet closing to a sweeping tale. My Clara, she saved the land. His eyes twinkle as he looks towards the figure of Jack. But the cowboy? Jack Colton? He saved us both. He brought justice when there was none. The video opens with a sweeping shot of a desolate, sun-baked western landscape. Dust devils dance across cracked earth, and a lone, weathered ranch house stands defiant under an immense, empty sky. From off-screen, a gravelly, old man's voice, full of character and a touch of wistful remembrance, begins to narrate. They say the West ain't for the faint of heart. They ain't wrong. Out here, the land can chew you up and spit you out, leave you nothing but dust in your soul. And hope. Well, hope's a scarce commodity. The camera slowly zooms in on a figure standing on the porch of the ranch house, Clara Whitlock, a woman in her mid-30s, her face etched with the kind of resilience only the frontier can forge, but her eyes holding a deep weariness. She wears practical, dust-worn clothes, an old rifle resting almost casually in the crook of one arm. Her gaze is fixed on the distant horizon, where a faint, ominous shimmer of heat rises, distorting the view. The narrator continues, his voice weighted with affection. She'd lost her husband to a cave-in, just another good man swallowed by the earth. A quick cut shows a younger Eli, a bright-eyed boy running across the dusty yard, kicking up small clouds. He glances back at his mother, a silent testament to her solitary battle. But she was tougher than rawhide. Daughter of a preacher, mind you, but frontier loss had toughened her more than any sermon ever could. She held onto that ranch like a burr to a blanket, clawed and scraped for every single sunrise. The camera returns to Clara, her silhouette sharp against the blinding sun. The isolation is palpable. She stands alone, a symbol of defiance against the harsh land and the harsher realities of a lawless time. Trouble, though, the narrator's voice deepens, a note of foreboding entering. Trouble, see, always comes calling, and sometimes it rides in on the wind, looking for what ain't rightfully theirs. A sudden, sharp dissolve. The distant shimmer on the horizon resolves into a rapidly approaching dust cloud, larger and more defined than before, hinting at something significant, something threatening, drawing ever closer to Clara's lonely outpost. The narrator's voice drops to a near whisper, a hook to draw the viewer deeper into the brewing storm.